rebuilding. The catastrophic failure, a new start. Physically, mentally, our careers, our businesses. Step back, first step, next step. The driver in me just wants to get it done tomorrow. We'll do this, do that, let's move this, where are we at with this? You build some confidence, build some self-esteem, start to feel better about yourself. The Silverback Blueprint Podcast, a show for men over 40. We focus on getting stronger, staying motivated, building discipline, creating a community, and becoming truly happy. So Luke just asked me a personal question and I'm offended. Luke, what was the question?
Have you read The War of Art? Steven Pressfield.
Look at this. Now he's dropping names like he knows Steven and stuff. No, I haven't, but I've heard about it. And then Luke's like, you got to fucking read this thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, I'm going on Amazon.ca right now. And I'm putting that bad boy on my wife's credit card and I'm fucking buying it. But what do you think? You're into it? What's going on, man?
I love it. I'm halfway through it. I started it yesterday.
So it's an easy read, obviously.
It's an easy read. You can take it one page at a time.
Okay.
But anybody who is creating something can benefit from getting into this book. He talks about resistance and all the different forms that it comes in and how you play those things out into real life procrastination and things, and you start to recognize
what it looks like.
You start to recognize what it looks like and then how you can overcome it.
So what's really cool, guys, too, is that, Luke is obviously our podcast producer here from Podcast Wagon, but he's got his business, which is the Podcast Wagon and stuff. So it's cool that he's doing a lot of the things that we talk about here to improve it. But how old are you now, Luke?
I'm 34.
So, Luke is a little more mature than the average 34-year-old and stuff like that. Typically the show is for guys over 40, but Luke's always been a little bit smarter than the average person. And it's really cool to see that the stuff he's benefiting from is timeless. It doesn't matter if you're in your 30s and your 20s, if you're in your 40s and stuff. It's just really, really sharp that you can get something like that and recommend to something like to a fucking old guy like me that I'm like, hey, I'm going on Amazon and buying that because I think highly of Luke and what Luke is doing, right? And I think that's the big thing too, Luke. How do people look at you now that, you're rocking the Podcast Wagon? Like, this is turning into a nice little interview. I like it. But how are people looking at you now that, this is your business, this is who you're doing, and how are you looking at yourself now that you're doing this?
Well, when people ask me about how I got this started or why I got this started, it was because I was really interested in podcasts and loved to listen to them. And I started it as a hobby, helping my buddy out, and I really loved it. So I made it my business. And that's people are blown away by that because a lot of people haven't considered that they can truly do what they love and make money doing it and design their lifestyle around the work that they want to do, right? And I feel great now that I'm doing that. I didn't even realize that I wanted to change the work I was doing until I started doing this. And then I started to realize I'm having way more fun with this side hustle or this extra project I'm doing, and realize, well, I can have that kind of fun every day, all the time. And then just started to educate myself on how to make it happen. I started to look at who's the best out there and what are they doing and how can I do that.
There's clues everywhere, guys. We talked about on many of our previous podcasts where it really is, I'm doing these 5 a.m. videos, and one of them I talked about, finding a mentor. Find someone, that's doing what you want to do. And it can be in the exact same field. There's room. We got to stop the scarcity thing where like, oh, the one guy's doing it, so there's no room. I'm like, fuck that. Number 2 is pretty good too. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, they leave clues everywhere, right? Or you can use someone as a mentor that's doing something in another field, but you still use them as a mentor as far as how they do things and how they carry themselves and the consistencies. We know that, there's so many guys out there that really want to do shit, but are so afraid to, right? So they fucking hate their job. I know cops who hate their job. I know firemen who hate their jobs. I know plumbers who hate their job. I know guys in the government that make fucking $100,000 plus a year that fucking hate it. and resent it, but they're trapped. They're trapped because they're afraid to do something else. They're trapped because they have a lifestyle that requires $100,000 and they have 2 cars and 3 vacations a year and, a cottage and stuff like that. And you know what? None of that is making them fucking happy because they're not doing it in a way they really want to do it. And, the crazy part is, it's a waste because, as we get older, and again, Luke, you figuring this out earlier than most, which is great. You're way ahead, is that really it's the quality of our life and our happiness that becomes so important as we get older. Because we realize that, I have a beautiful home. I grew up with nothing. I grew up in a shitty environment. It was fucking terrible. But I have a beautiful home. But what makes this home beautiful is I have a wife who I love, and I have children who I love and I'm proud of. And I'm proud of that I was able to create that coming from where I came from. I could live in a fucking cardboard box and be happy, right? As long as I have internet. But at the end of the day, what makes this house a home is the family I have in it and stuff, right? And I am proud of my house. I look out the window, I see the snow, like I said earlier in my last podcast, we're in the middle of March here in Canada, and my pool is covered by snow, but it's sunny today, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to be swimming, right? So I love all that shit, right? But at the end of the day, it adds to my happiness, but it's not what makes me happy overall, right? It's how I'm doing it in the rebuilding. And you've known me for a long time. You used to work for me and stuff. We were just talking the last episode about what if I fuck this shit up because things are going really well. When you worked for me back then, things were going really well. Right? And it was exciting and you wanted to be part of it and we had good people, but I made some mistakes and I fucked some shit up. And when the fucking plane started going down, people moved on, as they should, right? Because we have to look out for ourselves. But the plane was going down because I wasn't happy, because I put myself into a couple of situations that I fucking hated, and I didn't, two things. A, I wasn't sure how to get out of it, but B, I wasn't brave enough to get out of it. Right? That's really the big thing. When I look back at, how I fucked up 5 stores and that kind of thing, and I had to rebuild that, I realized that where I went wrong is I wasn't brave enough to make the changes I knew I had to make. Right? And that's the one thing that we just talked about earlier, is that now that things are getting busier and I'm getting excited and the brand is getting recognized, and it's not me saying that, it's people saying, I know your brand, I've seen it. It's exciting. But then that old feeling of what if I fuck this shit up comes around stuff. But what I'm trying to say, and what you're saying is, you know what, if you're doing what you love, it doesn't matter, because you're going to have days where you're punching in your 9 to 5 or you're miserable, where you're going to fucking have the same thoughts. What if I fuck this shit up? So if we're going to go through shit, we might as well do it for big reasons, because we love what we're doing, because we're going to go through shit, right? That kind of thing. What would be the biggest takeaway now that you're doing your own gig? What would be the biggest thing that you say is the most rewarding compared to when you worked for a company or someone else? Like, what's that one thing that you're like, this is the thing that I love so much about what I do compared to and there's nothing wrong for working for people too. I want to throw that caveat in. If you enjoy the company you work for and you enjoy being an employee, there is nothing wrong with it. The message here is not that being an employee is bad. It's being unhappy is bad. So if you're happy and you have a company you work for and you're treated well and you feel fulfilled and it's good for you and it gives you the lifestyle you truly desire, then fucking you're way ahead and then a lot of people as well too. But for going from being an employee to an entrepreneur now, what's that one thing that as an entrepreneur you're like, I fucking love this?
It's the freedom of time. And that was the whole reason why my wife and I both made the jump to working for ourselves, is so that we could free up our time. We were both making a great amount of money, but we were putting in a lot of time to make that money. Right? So we really simplified our life so that we could decrease the amount of hours that we had to be working, which gave us more time for each other, more time for the kids, more time for doing the family stuff, and more time to do whatever we wanted. So really the biggest thing is the freedom of time.
I think it's really cool because there's a point, and if you are an entrepreneur, there's a point where you want to create something. I think there's a point too where you realize that trading hours for dollars isn't what you're motivated by. But don't get me wrong, guys, when you start your own business, you're trading a lot of fucking hours for a lot less money. That's one thing that everyone looks at an entrepreneur or a business person and sits there and say, oh, it's great, he's got all this freedom, and may have it now, but when you started, you didn't have that. You were like, I got to hustle to get X amount of, clients and do it this way. So, if you work out your hourly wage, then it's fucking pitiful. Yeah. But you've got to do that heavy lifting. And I think there's a fear there for some people doing that. And at the end of the day, when you get past that, and some people, I know some business people that love being in their business 50, 60 hours a week. That's a part of who they are. That's okay. I'm kind of halfway now. I'm about 25 hours a week in the business, directly in the gym and stuff like that. But again, we're always going to work on scaling and systemizing things so I can step back a bit more. But again, at the end of the day, it really is that too, is to eventually get to the point where I can say, hey, you know what, I'm going back to Spain for a month. And I would work on stuff from there, and I would do stuff from there because I love what I do. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like, oh, thank God I got a month off. After a couple of days, I'm like, all right, let's work on this. Let's spend the morning doing this. So it's a little bit different that way as well. But I think for me too, it's creating something that's unique, something that's special, something that I can sit there and say, hey, that I fucking made that. To me, that's my big motivation. But at the same time, it's as I get older, it's to be able to do it more on my terms, and then say, hey, listen, let's take off for a week. I was in Columbus for 5 days a few weeks ago. That was great. And I went to the Arnold Expo and I saw the big names and hung out and brought a couple guys with me, and it was a great thing. Well, I want to do that more. Coming out of that, I'm like, hey, I want to do that more often, more specific. But hey, let's record a podcast next time I do it while I'm down there. Let's shoot some video. So while I'm there enjoying it, at the same time, I'm also aware of how this could help the brand, help the business. And the same for you. Look at this. We're doing this little interview that just spawned off the fact that you talked about this book. That's right? And I think that's the kind of cool part. And what happens when you listen to us, you can tell we like what we're doing. Yeah. Or it's beyond like, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff, right? And that to me is the big sign that you're on the right track, right? You have to be conscious about the money, and you have to say, hey, if I'm not quite at the money I want to be at yet, how do I structure the business to get to that point? And what do I need to do to make that happen? And that's part of the business part of being business, right? There's a difference as well, and I come back to this all the time. Entrepreneur and self-employed are a little bit different. Self-employed, a lot of times you're a consultant, you still work 40 hours a week, you just send a bill in and they pay you. That's okay too, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're an entrepreneur, it's having that control about how your time is spent, where your time is spent, what's going on, right? Creating some systems. Down the line, as you get busier, I'm sure you're going to end up getting a staff somewhere, right? Hector from the Philippines, who fucking knows, right? Who's really a guy, who's really a girl. That just makes it exciting, right? But and then all of a sudden, your business will morph a little bit more and you become to the next level. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, you welcome that overall, right? So it's really cool overall. So once again, that book is
The War of Art.
Because I was about to write it down as The Art of War, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have that. So guys, check it out, The War of Art. Like I said, and I know there's a couple people I've talked to since we've been doing this podcast that are saying, hey, Kurt, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. I know I sent one guy your way, and I don't know where that went. But at the end of the day, if you guys are thinking, some of you are thinking about doing your own podcast about fishing or dildos or whatever the fuck you're into or whatever's into you, right? Drop us a line, and I'll hook you guys up with Luke. His information is always at the bottom of each podcast. He's a really fucking good guy. He knows what he's doing, and it's pretty sharp. And you know what? At the end of the day, after a first conversation with Luke, you'll find that it'll be easier to make a decision if you want to go through that. So that's Luke's shameless plug for Podcast Wagon, done by me. He's holding up a script and pointing at the lines to make sure I do it right. Guys, this has been a great little impromptu interview with Luke for Podcast Wagon. Luke, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Awesome. So now you know who that voice is every once in a while, that snickers and stuff like that. Like, Kurt, that's stupid. What are you saying? Anyway, guys, I'll talk to you guys later. Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. If you haven't already got your new Work Hard Motherfucker t-shirt, head on over to hostilegear.com, save 20% using the discount code Silverback, and get that bad boy on your back. It looks good. It's slightly offensive. It's a great message. Don't wear it to church, but wear it to any family function. I'll talk to you guys later.